Hey, what's up guys? My name is Kevin the Tech Ninja, and today we're gonna take a deep dive into the Sony A6300. Now, what makes the A6300 such a great camera or a highly anticipated camera is that it's under $1,000 and it can shoot 4K, it can do 1080p slow motion, it can shoot Super 35, and it has a lot of really cool features about it. Now, I'm not gonna do a normal review, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a peel. And what a peel is a deep dive. We're gonna peel back some layers and we're gonna talk about specific features and how I use it. It's gonna be more of a 1 month with versus just a full review. Now guys, this video is made in collaboration with productpeel.com, and the website right now is actually invite only, but I have some invite codes for you. So hit that link down below, request an invite code, and I will get you one as soon as possible. And also guys, the website's 100% free, so don't worry about credit cards or anything like that. And this website is just a spot where people like me or even you can actually post your in-depth hands-on experience with the product. So anyways guys, let's get to peeling. Over the past few years, Sony has really stepped up their game in the DSLR world, which has been dominated by Canon and Nikon for so long. If you have not been paying attention, Sony has brought us some of the most technically advanced cameras at a certain price point. And this camera, the A6300, is trying to change what we think about budget DSLRs. Obviously, a camera is only as good as the person using it, so here's a bit of background for my usage. I've been using DSLRs for about 5 years. During this time with cameras, I've learned so much and I'm still learning. I do mostly videos and I play around with photography a bit, but when I'm buying a camera, the video performance is most important to me. So this video is focusing heavily on video, but I will speak on photography to the best of my ability as well. As we peel back the A6300, we'll see that it uses Sony's E-mount lens system. It's an APS-C 1.5 crop. It's also a CMOS sensor, measuring at 23.5 by 15.6 millimeters. The camera also shoots at 24.2 megapixels. On the video side of things, it can shoot 4K up to 30 frames per second. It can also shoot 1080p up to 120 frames per second. And it can also do 425 point phase detection and also 169 contrast detection. The viewfinder is electric, meaning anything you see on the back of the screen, you can see it when you're looking through the viewfinder. The back display is 3 inches and it does tilt up and down. However, it doesn't swivel out like Panasonic or some of the Canon cameras. Now, just like other Sony cameras, the ISO levels goes from 100 all the way to 25,600, and then the extended mode will take it all the way up to 51,200. The shutter type can be toggled between electric and manual, and you also get speeds from 1/4000th of a second all the way up to 30 seconds. Continuous shooting with autofocus, you can do up to 11 frames per second in JPEG, or RAW will give you 21 frames per second. The A6300 has a built-in flash as well, and this flash can be tied to a larger flash to act as a slave. Of course, you have all of your shooting modes on your dial, like manual, shutter, aperture, priority, and etc. Now, you do have an option to purchase the kit for around $1,200, and this gives you a 16 to 50 millimeter lens, and once you factor in the crop, it's actually more like a 24 to 75 lens. The lens is f3.5, but it's variable, so fully extended, you're looking at a 5.6 aperture. It's also an electric zoom versus manual, so it does make zooming a slower process. Here are a few example photos that I took with this lens in the raw shooting mode. When zooming in on this photo, you can tell that this image isn't overly sharp around the edges and it has a bit of feathering going on. Now beyond that, this image is ISO level 200. Now the exact same image with 500 as the ISO level, there really isn't much difference. Now here's a shot that I did and I wanted to see how it deals with dynamic range. This image I shot has backlight and the front was really dim. I was able to grab the dark elements back using Lightroom without an issue. Now when I tried this on the JPEG variant, it didn't take too kindly with me trying to retrieve some of that image back. Regardless, the back was well exposed, and the front I was able to bring up the exposure as well and get a nice evenly exposed natural looking shot. Now for most shots, the details are somewhat sharp, the color is pretty natural, but the camera isn't that great when it comes to grain. I've noticed some grain in my shots, and when bumping the ISO up to around 3200, although the image is passable, it's just not as clean as you'd hope to see. Under natural light, this camera is great, and most images come out really nice. Now when switching lenses to a better lens, you won't notice as far as this softness as you're seeing with this kit lens, but I am covering the camera with the kit lens. But if you did upgrade your lens to like the 24-70 or even the G Master lens, then you will notice a much better image reduplication as far as what you're seeing on the screen, and you are seeing better sharpness. The camera also has a pretty small buffer, meaning after a burst fire, you may need to wait up to 10 seconds for it to write to the memory card, even if you're using some pretty fast cards. Now there's one more thing I do need to mention, is that it does have a delay using an electric viewfinder. So if you're shooting something very fast and you have them right in the center, towards the end of your burst, you're actually behind the subject a little bit because the viewfinder needs to relay what's happening through the computer system. It's not instant like you'll see with a mirror camera. Overall, this camera is pretty solid when it comes to image quality, but it's not the best. If your primary focus is still photography, I really can't recommend this camera fully. I suggest you save a bit more money and purchase a camera that is full frame, like the A7 or even a Canon. And you can pick up a used A7 for around the same price, plus you have better lens selection with it being full framed, and you can get around half the noise, which is nice. Also something to consider that there isn't really one great telephoto E-mount lens out there. So finding a nice lens, you'll be using adapters or something like that to really make it work. So if you think about doing events and you're gonna be kind of far away from your subject, or you wanna do wildlife photography, the Sony system may not be the best for you. Now, if you want a compact camera that can take some really solid photos, it'll be tough to find a better camera, but to me, this camera makes a great secondary camera for stills. In my opinion, if you're doing professional shooting, this should not be your main camera. As we peel into the video modes, you can see some examples that I took with this camera and lens. I'm shooting in 24 frames per second in 4K mode. If you choose to shoot in 24 frames per second, you'll be shooting in Super 35 mode, which is actually a 6K image compressed to 4K, and this will give you the best results as far as image quality. You also reduce your crop factor to 1.5x. If you shoot in anything else but 24 frames per second Super 35, then you're stuck at a 2x crop with the standard image. Now, just like other kit lenses, this lens isn't overly sharp, but it is pretty fast when it comes to autofocusing. You know, just for a few $100s, I mean, you really can't do much better than this when it comes to a lens, but I do recommend upgrading your lens. With Sony, your lens selection isn't the greatest, and I'll be the first to admit it, and since this camera has such a huge crop, finding the perfect lens may be a bit tough. I do recommend getting a 10 to 18mm lens if you can afford it. At the time of this video, this lens is around $800. Another set of lenses that are great is the Rokinon Cine lens. They're mainly used for video because they don't have autofocusing, but you can get some amazing footage out of these lenses. These are my go-to lenses for my A7R2, and they work just as nice on the A6300, even though they're pretty big. I do recommend the 24mm or even the 14mm on the A6300. Also, one thing else to consider is that this camera does lack in-body 6-axis stabilization, which could lead to some very shaky shots if you are attempting to shoot them handheld. So you may need to look at lenses that has in-body stabilization as well. The autofocus on the A6300 is really fast, and it's actually one of the best traits of the A6300. So this camera would be great for sport videos in some circumstances. Here are some examples of the autofocusing in action on the A6300. As you can see from the video, the camera is extremely quick to switch between my hand and also the background. And this goes for photography as well. You're able to jump between targets with little fuss, and the camera nails autofocusing perfectly almost every single time, even with this less desirable kit lens. And just like other cameras, if you're doing a panning shot and you don't lock the focus, then the camera will start to grab other points to focus. And what you're gonna see is sort of this breathing effect where it's unfocusing and refocusing as the subject moves or as you pan or slide right past your subject. If your subject is a person, then I recommend registering their face. Now, when you register their face, what will happen is that the camera will then focus on that face, even if you move the camera back or forth. As long as it can make out the facial features, that face will remain in focus. You could also shoot at 120 frames per second in 1080p mode, allowing you to slow down fast motion. Obviously, this fast motion isn't as sharp as Super 35 mode, but it can lead to some really great shots. Now I know what you're thinking, guys, that everything about this camera when it comes to video sounds perfect and it's really great for sports, but there is something you need to consider, is that you need to have multiple batteries. And I'm talking 3 or 4 batteries at least, because you can only expect around an hour or so of shooting before your camera battery is completely depleted. Now, one more thing that Sony gets a bad rap on is that Sony cameras are prone to overheat as well, especially when shooting in 4K mode. I've had this camera overheat on me a few times, and this is running 4K video for an extended amount of time in high heat situations. For me, it was under studio lighting at around 2 hours of shooting. This isn't a big issue, as it's only happened to my A7R II a few times within the year of me having it, but this is a problem with Sony cameras and something to consider if you're shooting in hot environments, taking it to vacation to the Bahamas or something like that. Don't be surprised if it does overheat if you're shooting 4K for a very long time. Overall, the size alone makes this camera a very solid travel camera. It's not perfect at anything, but the price point is really hard to find a much more versatile camera. As I mentioned, I'm on the video side of things, and the footage from this camera is comparable to my A7R II, which is 3 times the price. If I could do it again, I'd honestly buy the A6300, and then with the extra money that I'd be saving, I would then purchase the 10 to 18mm lens and several batteries. Regardless, guys, this is one of those cameras that you should really need to think about it if you're a photographer or videographer, of what's most important to you. And that was my hands-on peel of the A6300. Once again, guys, this video is made in collaboration with productpeel.com. Hit the link down below, request a code, and you will be invited to the site. And also ask any tough questions you have there, and I'll be actually answering questions on the website, which is super duper cool. Because when you ask questions here, sometimes it's really hard to get to it and it gets pushed down the list. Ask a question on Product Peel and I will get to it and I will answer it to the best of my ability. As always, guys, I'm Kevin the Tech Ninja. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more great videos and giveaways. Stay blessed. This video was made possible by bnhphoto.com.